Thanks again. And like Scott said, my name is Nikki Dixon-Foley, and of course with FutureSync. A couple things about today. Obviously this is a different format. Everybody's getting a little bit more used to this online learning version kind of thing. And all of a sudden we're pitching this idea of, keynote addresses to you on Zoom as well. So what I'd love today, really, because I enjoy being in rooms with folks and you just get to know people so much better. But since we can't do that, if you'd entertain me in this effort, if you could just throw in the chat there where you're at, where are you sitting currently? Are you at home? Are you in an office? What town are you in? I'd just love to know, where everybody's coming from today. So while you're doing that chat, I will just share my screen out here with you, and we'll get this presentation up, and hopefully you had an opportunity. I think, Scott, were you able to kick this out via PDF earlier?
I did not send it out, but we will definitely send it out in an informational packet afterwards.
Excellent. That's great. So, you will get this access to this PDF. You'll have access to everything that you need in there. Again, just follow along, sit back, enjoy. And here's what I'd really love. Do not fear interrupting me. Please, if you have a question, if you have a concern, if there's something that interests you and piques your interest, go ahead and flag me down. Tell me to stop talking and engage, because that is just wonderful. So we've got Clyde City, awesome. Lambert, Medicine Lake, Seiko. I actually know most of these places, believe it or not. In Stevensville, Terry, excellent. East Helena, Shepherd, wonderful. So I'll give you a little bit more background about FutureSync and who we are and who I am. So I'll share this slide with you here. I'm definitely not going to read that to you. Basically, all this slide tells you is that we're really old. So by a show of hands, how many of you are familiar with FutureSync? Maybe saw Kurt speak to you a couple years back. Okay, wonderful. So a little bit about FutureSync is we've been around for about 30 years. And the way I like to describe the work we do is we come into partnership with organizations, all different types, all the way from, governmental agencies to mom and pop shops to hospital systems to manufacturers, everything, just about every industry we have in Montana, we've worked with. And the thing that we do is we step into the place anywhere that the humans and work intersect. And of course, we know just by the natural human behavior, we as humans are a hot mess most of the time. That even translates into our work lives. So we are always challenged. How do we become better leaders? How do we become more effective workers? And so our business, we really like to try to understand how to do that with folks and help them do it better. So we dig deep into things like culture. We dig deep into things like executive and leadership development. We look at how organizations are structured and is it effective? We think about strategic planning. We work through employee engagement. We talk a lot about succession and transition mapping. But the truth of the matter is all of that has everything to do with why do we do what we do? And it sounds like a rhetorical question, and we're going to really unpack that together today. But I hope to give us all a good foundation for understanding why powerful purpose is so important. So let me introduce my team to you very briefly. We're not going to spend a great amount of time here, but just want you to know these folks. If you ever get an opportunity to sit in a room with them, please do so. Amazing team that I have the privilege to work with. Wendy Sampson, of course, the first gal there on your screen. She is our founder, again, formulated this organization 30 years ago. And her big picture in life was this, that as human beings, we can always craft ways to get better, to do better, to lead better. And she built her whole entire organization, honestly, around building relationships and the important pieces of that. Kurt Swenson, now the owner, he bought the company from Wendy in January. So he's been a full year under the helm now. Again, Kurt, if you've been in the room with him, you understand how influential he is. And Swenson is a newer partner for us, and she is our vice president and also a facilitator for us. Amazing. She's a retired teacher, and we are very excited to have her on board. And then there's me. That's my mug. I'm here in Bozeman, Montana. And I've been in Bozeman for about 21 years now, born and raised in Montana. In fact, our entire team is Montana born and bred, which is kind of unique anymore these days. Like I said, I've been here in Bozeman 21 years, and I was living in Bozeman before it became Bose Angeles, which, Scott, I'm sure you understand if you've been around Bozeman a long time too, you know what I'm talking about. So let's really start to think about this concept. If we really want to peel the layers of the onion back about the powerful purpose, crafting why in our leadership vision, we really have to start with a foundational understanding. And the foundational understanding is going to come from this first. It is going to come from the idea of what is meaningful influence. What does that actually mean to us? How do we use it? How do we show up with meaningful influence? And what kind of product do we produce out of generating meaningful influence? So there's something I want us to remember. We can influence people in all sorts of ways. We can force people to make changes. This idea of compliance leadership, it works. It does work. But the challenge is it only works while you're standing in the room. It only works when you're sitting next to somebody in the same conversation, and they will do what you ask them to do. But compliance leadership doesn't change behavior. And that's what we really think about in meaningful influence. How do we engineer the opportunities to build meaningful influence? So we're going to start with foundational understanding because I want to craft for you a story, essentially. I want you to understand where you're at in your own personal powerful purpose, where you're at in leading others with organizations or your memberships or anything like that. Where are you at with crafting that powerful purpose? So we have to understand first, what is it? What do we mean by meaningful influence? Well, let's just quickly break it down. Meaningful, of course, having a serious or important or useful quality, right? Something that is purposeful, that designates as meaningful. It's a quality. It's a quality we're talking about. If we look at influence, we're actually talking about a characteristic. It's something that we can walk around with. It's the capacity to have an effect on somebody, the capacity to change a behavior. It's impactful. It's influential, right? It's creating a realm of influence. So if we really try to understand that from a bigger perspective, meaningful influence is a practice. It's a skill. It is something we have to develop. And my argument to us here today, my belief is that our own understanding of meaningful influence first comes from when we understand our why, when we craft why for other people. And we're going to unpack this in all different sorts of angles. Meaningful influence is when we can create an environment, when we, essentially prepare the fertile grounds for getting people to question that status quo, getting people to question, well, we've always done it this way. Why don't we keep doing it this way? Boy, I tell you what, in the last 2 years, I don't know about you all, but the world's been turned upside down, right? And we have been required to see things differently, to move differently in the space that we're at, given the circumstances that we're all in, the environment. What we do in meaningful influence is that we can create the opportunities for implementing what is a good desired outcome. And, I was listening to your conversation earlier and thinking about, you said, boy, as we make decisions as a board, it is a board decision. It is the concept that we come together unified, and sometimes we don't always agree with one another, but we come together unified with a decision to move forward in one direction. It's that desired outcome. So how do we craft it? How do we create meaningful influence? Well, like I said, I believe it starts with understanding our why. How do we do that? What does that look like for us? So in order for us to understand how to build meaningful influence, we first have to understand this. And here, this is something that I have found in the work that I do. Now, I've been in organizational development world for, going on about 18 years now. Here's what I know to be true, that the target of meaningful influence is to build out our whys. That's our leadership target. Build out your whys, not only for self, but for your organization, your people, the people that you work with, your members, whatever that might be. It's building that powerful purpose. So it actually is a two-prong approach. It's a kind of this double whammy of understanding. The first thing that we have to understand is this, and this is gonna, of course, get us all riled up and excited about everything, is we have to have a higher level of emotional intelligence. This is all about self-leadership. Now, here's the fun facts about emotional intelligence. A lot of folks will say, well, emotional intelligence, it's all that touchy-feely stuff. It's that soft stuff. And, we can't really do business with that emotional intelligence stuff. Well, here's where I'll actually challenge you. What we do know, and my team, they lovingly refer to me as the neuroscience nerd. I love understanding how the brain operates and how we operate as human beings with one another. And so I'm going to pitch a couple neuroscience things at you, have you think about them. What we know to be true about our brain's development is this. In life, when we are born, you are born with a particular set of, a particular amount of IQ, right? Your book smarts, your intellect. You're born with what you got. For me, I'm born with what I got. I will never be an engineer. Math makes me cry. I don't have the intelligence for math like an engineer has to do. With emotional intelligence, your EQ, the great thing is we can grow it. You can grow your emotional intelligence over time. And we have to do a couple things to grow our emotional intelligence. Now, let's understand emotional intelligence is really this. It's the awareness of self, it's the awareness of others, and it's the awareness of the environment around us, what's happening. Now, we can become really aware of all that stuff, but what counts is what we do with that data. What do we do with the information we've learned from the awareness of self, the awareness of others, and the environment? So this is all growing that self-awareness. But on top of this, here comes the challenging part, and I bet most of you will agree. We can be aware of ourselves all day and maybe aware of how other people interact, but this is the challenging part. Self-regulating, right? How do we self-regulate that challenging internal dialogue we have sometimes, that monologue, and not allow our weird to show up and create all kinds of funkiness around us? Self-regulation. The third component of this self-leadership component of building your why is all about focus and self-control. What do you choose to focus on? What do you ask people to focus on? Here's what I'll tell you. Whatever gets your attention is going to get all your energy, right? Whatever gets your focus draws all your energy. And sometimes what we focus on doesn't necessarily help us out in the long run. Self-control, the ability to navigate that. Where it comes down to the nuts and bolts of it all is that we have to design this planned horizon point. So the planned horizon point is really how we begin to craft our why. If we have clarity on our horizon point, then we know where we're going. Here's where I want to challenge you. Do you think that people will choose to follow you if you're not clear about where you're going, right? We can stand up in front of people all day long and say, hey, go with me, I'm a leader, right? Come with me. But if we don't tell them where we're going and why we're doing it, most of us will say, I don't think so. I actually want to know more. I need to know more in order to follow. So this is at the level. If we can manage self-leadership internally, and by the way, that's also developing your own vision for where you want to be as a human being and where you want to be in your leadership, then, and really only then, do we have the capacity, the ability to lead with influence in leading others. So I want to ask you a question. I ask that you maybe, you can, if you want, you can flip your mutes off and just yell it out at me. If you want to chat it in the chat box, that's great. I want you to think about one of the most influential leaders in your life. It could have been a boss. It could be a boss. It could be a family member. It could be a coach. Just think about that person for a second. And then tell me or chat in the chat box, what characteristics did they show up with that caused you to want to follow them? What characteristics did they have?
They're energetic and they believe in what they're doing and what the goal is, and they have good communication skills.
Absolutely. Yeah, that they're kind of charismatic is what I'm hearing you say, Carla. They're charismatic. They know what they're doing. They know where they're going, and they can communicate that well. JM says calm and confident, right? Kind of that calm in the storm of chaos. They make you feel inspired, included, right? There's this element of belonging that is created. Humble, absolutely.
People I've worked with that I really look up to really have a great ability to listen.
Carl, absolutely, right?
Yeah. That I've learned more by watching leaders who have that ability to just sit back and listen, stay calm, cool, calm, and collective, and not get defensive, which has helped me a bunch.
Right. Yeah. It's the concept of listening to hear and not listening to respond. Right. It's the idea that you actually are hearing people. Though all of those things we're talking about, that in itself, those characteristics that show up for those that have led you, that you found inspiring, are the characteristics of meaningful influence. So, I always ask this, well, gosh, if all these people in our lives have just this innate ability to inspire us to follow them, how did they get it? Are they thinking about their why? Have they designed that for themselves? And so here's where we start to dig deeper into this. When we consider what it looks like to lead others, there is a different way in which we show up in life. There's a different way in which we show up with people, are either staff members, with coworkers, with peers, with members, whatever that could be, is we show up in a mindset that looks different. It's the outward facing mindset. We also do this when we stand in space, that is, we take on this outward facing mindset and we have the paradigm shift about it's not about me, it's about we. We build the opportunity to elevate credibility. Now, we all know this. It takes weeks, months, and sometimes years to build up credibility. Do you agree? How long does it take to destroy it? One word, 1 second, one misstep, one misinterpretation, and your credibility could be shot. So we have to consider this in our leadership lives. How do we avoid shooting ourselves in the foot, right? How do we avoid that open mouth, insert foot syndrome that can shoot our credibility down? We have to really think about establishing your why. The final thing around leading others, all of this is nice and good, but it doesn't mean anything until we deploy it, until we put into action what we are trying to accomplish. Because when we do that, when we've got that figured out, and we have it well designed and it becomes intentional for us, what you will watch is you will be able to find and see people around you will follow you beyond a title. They'll follow you not because you're sitting on a board, not because you're the director of anything, not because you're the CEO, CFO, whatever that might be, not because of that, but because of something else. And we'll also look around and we can begin to watch people follow us into the difficult. We have seen the difficult in the last 2 years. In the work I do, I get to see where people are following and where they can say, nope, you haven't built credibility, you haven't built trust, and I don't want to follow anymore. We're all familiar with the terminology, the Great Resignation. We have to think about this. We have to think twice about this. What's the cause? There's yet one more thing that we look for and we watch is that when we know us as human beings, us as leaders of managers, whatever, when we look around and we can watch people go to great lengths to never let us down, when all of these things combined, what you will begin to see is that your meaningful influence is growing, your credibility is growing, your work around outward facing mindset is paying off, and your work around your own self-leadership is paying off. So I always like to share this story about meaningful influence and the concepts of people that'll follow beyond the title, go to, walk into the difficult with you and go to great lengths to never let you down. I worked with a woman for several years, one of my bosses in another position. Most intelligent woman I've ever met. She PhD, super, super intelligent, just amazingly smart. Her whole family was smart. Her husband is an astrophysicist. He gets how black holes work. So like dinner events with them was really very intimidating. They're incredibly smart people. But I think about what was it about Jamie that caused me to want to follow her? She held my feet to the fire, right? She held me accountable. She pushed me to be a better leader, a better manager of others, a better person than I thought I could be. And why was that? Because she had a target, she had a goal, she had a why. And she always described that to me. I followed her why. It inspired me. Now, I'll also tell you this, Jamie was an incredible goofball and a self-proclaimed Bigfoot hunter. I'm just going to put that out there. Total nutball, but so much fun to be with, right? So we dig into this. We need to dive deep. There are people out there that have developed a why or have thought about a why and start to walk through life with that why, inspires others with that why, inspire their organizations with a why. So how is it done? So we're going to look at this in 3 different ways. We're first going to look at the outward facing mindset and begin to think about how do we craft for ourselves that outward facing mindset? Well, here's what I can tell you is that I tell this to everybody I meet, and I'm only slightly joking. On my headstone, I'm just going to have put, everybody gets a choice. Because I am a firm believer that in everything we do in our lives, we get a choice. We get a choice in how we show up. We get a choice in how we behave. We get a choice in how we react and interact. We get a choice. So we have to step back and decide, what is that choice going to look like? Well, we look at 2 elements that can help us monitor how we want to walk through that choice. Why do we make the choices we do? Well, like I said, we've got 2 components. We have our internal locus of control opportunity, and we also can be influenced by the external locus of control. So all that is really, honestly, just big words to say, are we going to be accountable or are we going to be a victim? Are we going to live in victimville of our own choices, or are we going to live in accountabilityville? So if we walk around understanding we have a choice, that we have a choice about our own engagement, like how involved we want to be in work, in life, in whatever, in communities, in boards, in committees, we get a choice. Internal locus of control says, I get to choose my engagement levels. We also get to choose my own behavior, right? I control my behavior. I control my decisions. I control my emotions. Well, hopefully, sometimes we don't control them well, but we have that opportunity, right? They're my words. They're my mistakes. And it's my trust, right, that I give to people, that I offer people. It's mine, internal. We make decisions when we focus on the internal locus of control. We make decisions within our scope of us. If we do it the opposite, if we look out to the outside world and we say the external locus of control teaches me how to show up the way that I want to show up, other people's words might make us mad, right? Other people's behaviors might cause us to behave in some way or another. Other people's choices might inflict upon us that, all of a sudden we're cranky pants about everything and we can't take it anymore. And other people's mistakes, it causes us great challenges and we feel offended by it and all of these things. What this really, again, boils down to is you get the choice. You get the choice to live in the internal locus of control, which I just call your accountability loop, right? And when we live in our accountability loop, we become aware of our surroundings. We become aware of the challenges, of the situations, of the things, the mistakes that are going on. We become aware and we recognize that we are involved at some level. And we take all those learnings and we grow and we change and we modify. Internal locus of control, the accountability loop of it all. But we're human and sometimes we dip into that victimville loop, right? That external locus of control. And we blame others for the challenges. We might hide from the challenges, pretend they don't exist, put our head in the sand, right? We could do all of those things. But it all backs up against, why do we make the choices we make? What is your why? Why do you do these things? Why do you get up every single day and go into the office? Why do you get up every single day and head out and into the communities? Whatever that looks like for you, why do you do that? What drives you? Well, again, my argument is this: if we develop our why, our powerful why, we craft it for self and we craft it for and with others, then we build credible leadership. So I want to ask you this question. I just ask you you can jump off mute. Big question. Why do you do what you do every day? What causes you to get out of bed and want to do what you do every single day? Why do you do it? Chat it in the chat box. Jump off mute. Let me know.
For me, Nikki, it's Carl. It's just passion, my love for agriculture, for the resources.
Absolutely. Passion drives you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Anybody else? So I have people ask me pretty frequently, why in the world do you do what you do? You travel a ton, you're away from your kids, you're away from your family. Why would you do that? And here's what I can tell you. Yeah, it's hard, right? You got to be away from family. You got to be away from kiddos. And I see John's got a nice little itty bitty there. And it's hard, but why do I do what I do? Because I get to stand in the room and watch people grow. I get to watch them expand their minds. I get to watch them get the aha moment. And that gives me energy. That is my why, watching the aha moments. So when we take this outward facing mindset, we begin to craft the why in our own mind. We begin to lay the foundations for credibility. And like I said, credibility can go away in an instant if we're not careful. Credibility is also somewhat of it's a skill and it's a quality. It's a quality of inspiring others. When we inspire others in meaningful ways, right, in gracious ways, in ways that are productive, what we do is we actually have the capability then to build trust. People are more willing to provide, to give you trust when you have higher levels of credibility with them. People are also willing to do this. When you are credible and you are able to describe and communicate your why, you have a better opportunity for people to align. Wow, people alignment has been a kind of a hot button topic lately, hasn't it? We think about just the expansive challenge we have in our cultures right now with alignment. And it seems to be getting stretched further and further and further apart. We also have this, when we have quality of credibility leadership, we also raise the bar on accountability. Now, in some circumstances, Kurt and I talk a lot about accountability. We talk a ton about the importance of building that accountability measure within cultures of work and all of this. Here's what I'll tell you is I honestly believe in some way, shape, or form, we kind of need an accountability revolution in this country, right? My dad was born in 1939, born in Virginia City, Montana. When he was a kid, his dad was a miner, and they didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have a lot of things, and they would do trading. They would barter, right? And accountability would rest on simply a handshake. You would shake your neighbor's hand, and that was as good as gold. Now, today, I'm not so sure, right? Not so sure anymore. Credible leadership inspires all these things. Credible leadership, the development of our own why, and I'll get to how I'm going to ask you to start developing your why, is when we as leaders are able to sit in a space where our leadership just doesn't impact, the one or two people around us. It just isn't about a good decision. It just isn't about alignment, but it is about building and elevating the self-worth, the self-concept, and the self-esteem of all of those people around you, even those you might disagree with. That's credible leadership right there. That's where that can come from. So we build into this outward-facing mindset, building the credible leadership. And now comes the important part, deploying it. How do we deploy the credible leadership? How do we deploy the why? The great, powerful purposes. Well, here's what we do know, and I would guess that, maybe some of you can relate to this. At least I hope that you can. Think about a time in your professional career and in whatever you've done in your life, and think about how, in some cases, the way you view the work has changed because you've understood something bigger behind it. I think about Carl's statement, the passion of agriculture, right? A lot of hard work, sweat, blood, tears, all along that industry. But there's something that has clicked and has changed the way we view the work. If we can think and develop and communicate, we can't just have it all internally. If we can communicate what that purpose is, that powerful why factor, it changes the way we view work. Let me give you an example. Before I jumped on board with FutureSync, I worked for an organization called Westpaw. Anybody here at Westpaw? They build dog toys. Awesome. Awesome. Love it. So Westpaw's right here in Bozeman, Montana, manufacturer of dog toys. They sell dog toys all over the world. About 70, 80 employees right here in Bozeman. I went to work for that company because not because of, they were this pretty cool manufacturing group and they had all this really interesting stuff going on in their, in their world. But I went to that organization because they had a purpose. When I onboarded with them, within the first 2 days, actually, to tell you the truth, within the hiring process, but within the first 2 days of hiring with them, I went through basically an entire course on why Westpaw does what it does. Westpaw did not start the business to make dog toys. That was not the ideal. That was not the vision. That was not the why. The why the company was started was to provide a working wage for the people of Bozeman. to provide the opportunity for people to have health insurance. The icing on the cake was this: we got to make really cool products that made people happy and made dogs happy. That was the why. I think about High Heat Industries in Lewistown, Montana. Anybody familiar? Ever heard of High Heat? Awesome. High Heat Industries, another amazing story. They're amazing partners of ours. We've been with High Heat for about 20 years. They make heaters that go in like deli cases, that go in NICU units to keep newborn babies warm, that go in helicopters and airplanes to keep things from freezing up. They didn't start the company to build heaters. They didn't start the company and move it, by the way, to Lewistown from the Midwest just to have cheaper places to build. They started the company because when Charlie started that organization, his whole entire purpose, his why, was to provide a living wage where somebody could buy a home in Lewistown, Montana. His goal was 40 people. Their population is up to about 80 now, their work population. Great purposes change the way we view the work. Great purposes also create a space for people to do amazing things. It inspires us. It creates synergy. It moves people in a productive way forward. Developing our why, it gives us purpose. It gives us a point of view to reach for. I want to explain very quickly how the why factor works. Anybody heard of the Golden Circle by Simon Sinek? Anybody heard of Simon Sinek? Okay, so Simon Sinek, real brainy guy. He's pretty interesting dude, but he came out with this concept, which is so simplistic that we should all be kicking ourselves about why we haven't thought of this before. Simon Sinek talks about his golden circle. He says, we as human beings, actually, we converse with one another in the wrong way. We converse backwards, he calls it. We talk about our what we do, right? When you meet somebody, you say, well, what do you do for a living, right? What we do. And then we might, if we're lucky, we might talk about how. Well, how do you do that? How do you work what you do? He said, most of the time, we never even get to the why. Why do you do what you do? He says we have to think differently. We've got to flip that on its head, and we have to start speaking about our motivation. Why do we do what we do? Why are we asking others to do something with us? This is where motivation comes in. And honestly, if we look back at the neuroscience of it all, this concept is based in biology, not even psychology. It's based in biology. Our brains are more affected by understanding the why something is occurring before we even get to the what. Because the why is motivation. That's the emotional motivation. Our brain wants to run high speed on emotional motivation. The what comes in the critical thinking part, which takes a little longer for some of us to get to. If we talk about our whys, if we develop our whys, we then can talk about the how. How is it going to happen? The process. After we describe the process, then we build what is going to be the outcome. Why, how, what? Here's what else I'll tell you. This might be pretty important for you these days. What we know from neuroscience, what we know from the neurobiology of the brain, is that when we have a clear understanding of why, either why we exist or why we do the work we do, we decrease burnout. We increase resiliency. We have better communication, connectedness with others if we understand our why. I don't know about the rest of you, but burnout and resiliency fatigue is a real thing. We better find our whys. So here's my challenge. Here's where the rubber meets the road. And here's my ask of you. Think about developing your why. But I want you to think about it in two ways. The first is this, and I'm going to tell you, my belief system is this. We've got to understand our own why first. If we can develop that, if we think about it, if we can solidify it in our mind, why do you do what you do? Then you can start to craft other whys for the people around you. So my encouragement is this: build the powerful purpose for yourself first. The powerful why. It's all about leadership by intent. Now, when we talk about leadership by intent, what I'm really going to tell you about is your brand, your leadership brand. This is an experience to be anticipated. Let me give you an example. Your leadership brand, you get three. You get three statements. They cannot be like a paragraph long, because the reality is you'll never remember them. It's one or two statements that you will recall when it is very hard to do so. When you could potentially be at your worst, you have to recall this leadership brand, the experience to be anticipated. Think about the experience to be anticipated. Imagine with me, if you will, really quickly. Walmart, 11:30 on a Friday night. That's going to be an experience to be anticipated. Do you agree? Could be pretty odd, right? We might see some interesting things. Now, imagine with me the experience to be anticipated if you walk into Saks Fifth Avenue, New York City on a Sunday afternoon. Very different experience to be anticipated. When you show up in a room, when you sit at a board table, when you sit with your members, when you walk into the local cafe, whatever that is, what experience do you want people to anticipate from you? Developing our brand is all about your right shoulder brand standards. Your right shoulder brand standards are the things that are meaningful service to others. It's about generosity. It's about authenticity. It's about finding purpose and momentum, making your tail wag. If we have our brand standards sitting on our right shoulders, what that is going to do for you is counteract those dang left shoulder self-preservation behaviors. This is your weird. We all have it. We've all got our weirds, right? And when things get really tense, sometimes our weird show up. And the problem with our weird showing up is that it actually is conduct that is unbecoming of a professional. It undoes you. It undoes you. But if we lean in with our whys, our brand standards, it's conduct that sets us apart from others. Now, without a doubt, the challenge of developing your own brand standard, your why do you do what you do, to balance out and overtake that left shoulder standard, is that it will become guerrilla warfare in your head, because it's going to be hard. I'll tell this story very quickly about my brand standards, why I do what I do, right? One of my brand standards is this: always leave a positive impact. Now, that isn't sexy. That isn't anything fancy to anybody else, but to me, it means something. To me, it causes me to behave differently when I don't want to behave differently. Example is this: working in Butte one afternoon with a team that was very, very, very toxic. Spent the whole afternoon feeling like I was in the middle of an MMA match, trying to keep people from just wanting to kill each other, right? Got done with the session, headed back to my hotel room. All I wanted was a cold beer and to sit on the bed, kick my shoes off, and just relax. That's all I wanted. Got back to the hotel, had my dinner in my hand, and I had a nice ice cold beer. Ice cold. I'm talking, ice on the outside of the container cold. Got in the elevator, glanced up, and I see this older gentleman hustling down the hall with his bag. I was tired. I didn't want to talk to another human being again. I'm not kidding you. My finger started to shoot towards the close elevator door button. I'm not kidding you. And that brand standard started chirping at me and it said, Nikki, you have a standard, leave a positive impact. So instead of hitting that door close button, I actually put my hand in front of the door, held it open for the guy, let him on. We had a 10-second conversation, big deal, right? But I didn't close the door on the guy. I held the door for him. My why is to leave a positive impact. My why is to lean in and learn. These things drive me. They inspire me to do differently. They return me to who I authentically want to be as a leader. So my challenge, develop your brand, develop your why. Remember, you get 3. They can't be fancy, long, drawn out descriptions because you'll never remember them. Short, something to remember that will change your behavior. That's the development of who you are. But we can't stop there. When we develop our why, we also have to understand, how do we integrate who we are and what we do and why we do it into our profession, into our communities? What do we have to do? We think about this from an organizational perspective in the work I do. And what we encourage here is that you start to consider, how do you grow the world of the whole and have it impact the world of the one? How do you develop your why so that your organization as a whole understands where they need to go? But you also drive that all the way down to the person standing on the front line, to the person at the front desk, wherever that is. How do you get them to understand that exact same why and powerful purpose? Well, there's this little thing, I don't know if you guys have heard of it before, called mission, vision, and values. Heard of them? Right? The whole concept about why these things are developed is because we want to connect people to the organizational purpose and where you're going. But what happens is sometimes those mission, vision, values, they just are nice on a wall, or they're on a plaque, or maybe on our website. But how often do we actually pull those out and we actually begin to think about structuring conversations with people in our organizations around that purpose? Structuring behavioral outcomes around the values. Well, I'll tell you what, I probably wouldn't have a job if people did that all the time, quite frankly, right? I have a job because we forget to do that sometimes. Powerful purpose. Establishing your own personal why is your first step. Developing the why for your organizations, for your board, for whatever that is, comes right in behind that. If we craft succinct why, powerful purpose, and give people a reason to see the future and the vision for what's coming next, we create the opportunity to unify. We create the opportunity to move people in meaningful ways of great influence. So I'm going to leave you with this quote. Establish your why. Mark Twain says this: the 2 most important days in your life are the day that you were born and the day that you discovered your reason why. I love that quote. I think it's brilliant. So with that, I'm going to leave open a few minutes here for questions or comments, cries of outrage. I will always welcome cries of outrage if people have questions.
Questions or thoughts for Nikki?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when I'm thinking about my role working with county farm bureaus, when they're deciding what their why is, which I'm sure coincides very closely to our state farm bureau's why, do you think it's important for the board as a whole to understand everyone else's why?
Here's why I think it's important, because it builds in clarity, right? Sometimes people will make decisions that we just are not sure why they're making that decision. It doesn't make sense to us. But if we can slow down enough to understand their why and the intention behind their decision, sometimes that gives us clarity.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean we may not still align with it, but at least now we know something new. So I think awareness is really important around understanding others' whys. I do believe that.